All right, welcome back. I'm Vinny Politan, live here on CourtTV. We do it every night, Monday through Friday from 8 to 11, taking you inside the world of crime and justice. Hour 3 is when we bring in our think tank, our panel of experienced attorneys who often do not agree with me. Hour 3 starts now. In Salem, Idaho, the remains of Doomsday cult mom Lori Vallow Daybell's children, Tylee and JJ, were recovered by investigators. Tonight, we return to the scene and take a much closer look at what investigators found and what it all means in the murder investigation. In Atlanta, Georgia, the woman accused of burning down the Wendy's restaurant after the shooting death of Rayshard Brooks under arrest and appearing in court. What exactly is her connection to Rayshard Brooks?
I do not find the lack of a criminal record that persuasive.
In Fort Hood, Texas, foul play suspected in the case of a missing soldier. What happened to Vanessa Guillen?
I still don't understand why it had to take a little bit more than 6 weeks for us to start taking action.
Plus, the 13th juror speaks. Tonight, we take a look at your reaction on social media. Welcome back. We got a lot to get to this hour, so let me jump right into it. We begin in Idaho in the case of Lori Vallow Daybell, the so-called Doomsday cult mom. Her new husband, Chad, his backyard became a crime scene when Lori Vallow Daybell's two missing children, JJ and Tylee, their remains were found in that backyard. Tonight, Chanley Painter takes a much closer look at what investigators were looking at and how it may or may not help in the investigation into the murders.
On the morning of June 9th, 2020, police and FBI descended on Chad Daybell's property in Salem, Idaho, armed with a search warrant for evidence in the case of Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow, the missing children of Daybell's second wife, Lori Vallow. The Daybell home sits on a corner lot in a farming community north of Rexburg. Stretching east about 4 acres, the property consists of the family home, 2 sheds and a red barn. Just feet from this busy road is Chad Daybell's backyard. Searchers focused on this area beyond the red barn, digging in the dirt under blue tarps for 2 days. It's an area in clear view from this road. According to a probable cause affidavit, authorities homed in on multiple sites of interest. Police say these places matched the cell phone location of Lori Vallow's brother, Alex Cox, in September 2019. The same month the children disappeared. The first site was an area on the north edge of the property. That corresponded with 2 GPS pings from Cox's phone on September 23rd. The area measured about 4 feet by 2.5, with a patch of weed growth shorter than the surrounding area, suggesting it was recently disturbed. Authorities used a backhoe excavator to pull back the top layer of sod, revealing a body wrapped in plastic and duct tape beneath several large flat rocks and pieces of flat paneling. The on-site anthropologist confirmed it to be human remains. We now know to be JJ Vallow. Chad Daybell was arrested around 11 a.m. as the search continued for 16-year-old Tylee Ryan. Authorities then turned their attention to this area between the red barn and a fire pit. An area we know now is the Daybell Pet Cemetery. The site correlated to several GPS pings of Alex Cox's phone on September 9th, 2019. Authorities methodically sifted through layers of dirt in this area. They found pieces of bones and human tissue, some of which were burned. Authorities then focused on the Daybell fire pit, where neighbors reported seeing bonfires in the fall of 2019. And police point to a text message Chad Daybell sent to his wife on September 9th, the day after Tylee was last seen alive. In the text, Chad said he was burning tree limbs after shooting and burying a raccoon in the pet cemetery. Authorities have not revealed what exactly they uncovered in the fire pit area, but we know now Tylee's remains were found on the property too.
A lot of evidence in that backyard. A lot of evidence. But can they take that evidence and link it to a killer? That's what they've got to do. They're in the middle of a murder investigation here. Okay, yeah, you can get Chad Daybell for having that in his backyard, having remains there. Yes, certainly. That's I don't think a difficult case. But this is a murder investigation. Someone took the lives of these two children, and they've got to use this evidence and tie it to that person. Let's bring in our think tank tonight. We've got a good one. Kimberly Bandeau with us, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, former magistrate court judge. Also with us, Michael Sterling, criminal defense attorney, former federal prosecutor, and Michael Bixon, who never agrees with me, criminal defense attorney with us. Great to have everyone here. All right, looking at this scene, right? And let's remember the timeline here. September is when these children go missing. We're excavating and digging in June. Kimberly Bandeau, do you think there's going to be anything forensically that we're going to be able to retrieve from this site to tie to a killer?
Well, actually, I have a cheat sheet because I listened to your program an hour before. So there's some trash bags and some duct tape. And so we know that using those items will help them be able to get some invisible, intangible evidence that may tie them to the trash bags that was in his home or the duct tape that was in her home with little fibers and microscopic objects.
Michael Sterling, I'm a big common sense guy, and my common sense, my gut tells me exactly who's responsible, right? And I think everyone watching right now is thinking the same thing I'm thinking. But sometimes weird stuff happens when you get inside a courtroom and you get 12 people in a box and all of a sudden they don't see the trees through the forest. Is that going to be a problem here?
That's true, Vinny. I mean, at the end of the day, facts and evidence always have to be tested by what was called the greatest invention for determining the truth, and that's cross-examination. So yeah, it's always going to be a problem when you step inside of a courtroom and you've got circumstantial evidence, particularly evidence that's been around for so long. I know you don't like to be reminded of the Casey Anthony case, Vinny, but this reminds me a little bit of that case where you had some of this physical evidence, but because of the length of time and delay, there were all of these experts that came in and were able to raise some reasonable doubt in that particular case. So yeah, there's always going to be trouble when you have a circumstantial case like this.
And it's a fair comment tonight, Michael, because the investigators themselves have the same exact concern regarding that specific case. Michael Bixon, where does the common sense go, right? I mean, these are two children. They have a mother, and then they go missing, and the mother lies about where they are. That's happened before. And then goes on with her life, gallivanting with her new husband and doing whatever couples do together while the children are missing. And then the children are found dead and discarded. It's happened before. Why can't we use a little more common sense in cases like this?
Well, I think we can. The question is, who does this murder really point to? And so far, I think it's pointing more towards Chad than it is Lori. It being on his property, them using his cell phone records, what was actually, the text that he sent out. I think there's a lot more pointing towards him than there is Lori at this point. And I think as they, do the autopsy and they really start to go in and they look at the evidence of the bags, the duct tape, everything else, I think we're going to start to see more of this point to both of them and not just him. But for now, yeah, I mean, look, it's a very circumstantial case. It's not a great case for the defense already, but I think as time goes on, this evidence is going to begin to pile up, and it's going to make it harder and harder for the defense to actually argue for their clients.
Michael Bixon agreeing on common sense with me tonight. That is awesome.
Sort of.
Let's write that down, Mike. Write that down, Michael. And you mentioned the autopsy. Let's take a look at what the coroner is saying now, because we've got new news today that was reported by Chanley Painter. Outside and ancillary testing have been ordered and will take several weeks to return. Once all results are received, the forensic pathologist reports will be provided to the Fremont County coroner. So they're still waiting for a few more tests to take place, Kimberly Bandeau. What if, though? What if, worst case scenario for prosecutors like I was, we don't have a cause of death? What happens if the pathologist comes back and says, you know what, those remains, I can't figure out how these children died?
You're going to have to implore that the jurors use their common sense, look at the actual evidence that's in front of them, and connect the dots. And you help them as a prosecutor to connect the dots from A to Z to explain how this happened. You give them the motive of why it happened, and then you hope and pray that they use their common sense to connect all the dots and actually believe it and convict him.
Michael Sterling, you're a former federal prosecutor, now great criminal defense attorney, doing cases around the country. If, in fact, the medical examiner comes back and says, I can't give you a cause of death, I just can't because of what happened with these remains, which side, because you've been on both sides here, which side has the better argument? Which side is walking into the courtroom a little more confident?
I mean, I still think the prosecutors would have the better argument in this particular case, Vinny. I think that despite the scientific expertise providing you with an exact cause of death, there's enough circumstantial to demonstrate to jurors that this was a homicide. I mean, clearly these children did not die of natural causes. You've got text messages connecting the individuals and some of that circumstantial evidence saying that we just, immediately after Cox leaves the house, Daybell sending a message saying we just, we just burnt some pets. And then you find the children at the pet cemetery, or one of the children at the pet cemetery. So I think the prosecutors would still have the upper hand in this particular case, because even if you can't give a scientific cause of death, you can use circumstantial evidence to demonstrate that these children died from a homicide.
Michael Bixon, we live in a world where people watch, and in the CSI effect, they want all this science, science, science. This may not be that case. Can the story carry the day? This bizarre behavior, this cult-like stuff, these dead spouses, these lies, these not caring about where the children are. Can that narrative story propel prosecutors all the way to where they want to be, which is ultimately murder charges and a murder conviction here?
I think it can. And I mean, make no mistake, this is a very circumstantial case, but that doesn't mean that they can't secure a conviction based on that alone. I mean, there are plenty of circumstantial cases that, end in a conviction. And yeah, people have it in their mind that, they want to see this hard, scientific evidence. They want to see people come in and the whole, scientific community come in and testify about what happened. And the reality is very few cases are actually like that. A lot of cases are more like this, where they're really based on circumstantial evidence. I think the biggest problem for the defense is that there have been so many different statements made that contradict what we're seeing here and these bodies being found. And it's going to make it very difficult for them.
All right, we shall see. We'll continue to track this one. When we come back, our think tank stays in place, and we've got a story that's got me a little bit angry tonight involving a missing soldier and what investigators didn't do when this soldier went missing. That's next.
A mother breaking down over her missing daughter, 20-year-old Vanessa Guillen, who was last seen at Fort Hood, Texas on April 22nd. Since that day, 2 months ago, Vanessa's family has been frantically looking for answers. This week, for the first time, the Army acknowledged they suspect foul play.
I still don't understand why it had to take a little bit more than 6 weeks for us to start taking action, for them to start taking action, because we started since day one.
According to Army investigators, Vanessa was last seen at 11:30 a.m. in the parking lot of her squadron headquarters. Her car keys, barracks room key, ID card, and wallet were all found in an armory room where she'd been working earlier in the day. Her phone, however, has not been found.
My sister, she was being sexually harassed on base, which is unacceptable.
According to Vanessa's family, before she went missing, she was upset that a sergeant had been sexually harassing her, including an incident when she was showering. The Army apparently didn't think that was significant during the initial investigation.
That part of the investigation just started last week, and it was started by the colonel internally because CID was not going to pursue a sexual harassment allegation because that's not, in their view, criminal in nature.
That's Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia, who's pushing the Army for answers. She talked with CourtTV about her frustration with the Army's lack of transparency.
I don't think they were forthcoming to the family. It's about the Army doing right by a family who's grieving for a daughter. It's not right that that it had to take a member of Congress.
What's your take on what is the problem here with the Army? Are they embarrassed that they've lost a soldier? What you know more than we do. What do you think is behind the delay and the lack of information up until you got involved?
All this should have, frankly, again, started a long time ago. And you're right. We know how cases go from missing person to suspect of foul play. And I don't know why it took them 2 months. I just don't know. The Criminal Investigative Division of the Army is the one handling this. There are still some questions that we asked that they just told us that because of the pending investigation, they wouldn't provide any answers. That was frustrating.
While Vanessa's phone has not been recovered, phone records show she was texting with her supervisor before she went missing, which, given these sexual harassment complaints, seems to raise even more questions.
So we're wondering whether he used her phone to text himself and make it look like she was working. Vanessa had a sergeant come into a shower inappropriately, walk in to a shower while she was naked. We suspect it's that same person that was her supervisor that same day after she was missing.
Vanessa's story has struck a chord in the Latino community, not only because she's missing, but because the perception is that the Army has not done enough to find her. Actress Salma Hayek posted this image on her Instagram page holding a homemade Bring Vanessa Back poster. Army investigators are vowing to do everything possible to do just that. The family is hoping that it's not too late.
Ella es nuestra niña. She's one of our young ladies, our girls. She's everybody's daughter. She's everybody's daughter. We are wanting answers. It's hard to believe we haven't had answers.
I don't understand this. I mean, you sign up to be a part of the U.S. Army. What an incredible, heroic sacrifice as an American you are making. And then I think the Army has some obligation when you go missing to do anything and everything to find you, to find out what happened to you, to follow every lead. And how about communicating with the family of the missing soldier? This is a missing soldier, and it takes 2 months for them to go missing before we say, oh, maybe there's some foul play here. Let me bring back in my think tank, Michael Bixon. I don't understand why it would take 2 months to suspect foul play and to not have an open line of communication with the family of one of our soldiers.
I'm not impressed. I mean, I have definitely seen better in terms of investigations, and the amount of time that has gone by from the inception of this case to where we are at now, and the amount of action taken by the Army, I think is a discredit to the people who serve. I've handled, Army investigation cases, and a lot of the times from what I've seen, and again, look, this is a very limited perspective, but the cases that I've handled that have come out of Army investigation cases, I think they're lacking. And this case, I think, is another symptom of that. And I think that, again, the amount of time that's gone by and the amount of action are just, it's absolutely what should have not been done, and I think it's terrible for the family.
Kimberly Bando, we've got an allegation of sexual harassment, walking in on the shower of a soldier of the opposite gender. I mean, shouldn't happen. But do you think that maybe there could be some connection? I mean, can 2 + 2 sometimes equal 4? How do they not? What is this, 1975, where we're trying to cover things up and look the other way? I mean, I don't understand this. How does this happen in 2020?
I think that because they don't want the scandal, that they're helping with the cover-up, not knowing that the cover-up actually is going to make the scandal a lot larger, instead of owning up to the fact that there's a bad seed in the bunch, but the whole seed is not bad. And so I can just see this, once the investigators really start seriously investigating, that this will be a congressional hearing as to a culture that's occurring not only at this base, but other bases, because of her missing, there's actually been a whole movement where everybody's female soldiers are coming forward with their stories. So I think this is actually going to spark a big, huge fire within the Army.
Yeah. Any soldier goes missing, the Army should do anything and everything to find them and figure out what happened and figure out who is responsible. When we come back, folks, we got a lot more to talk about, including the Atlanta Wendy's fire. Someone's been arrested. We got the bond hearing coming up. And don't forget, on Sunday, the latest episode of CourtTV's true crime series, OJ 25, 8 p.m. on Sunday. This is an opportunity to witness the trial like you've never seen it before.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julia Janae with your legal news break out of Chicago. First, some waffling from the key witnesses in the Jussie Smollett alleged hoax case. Yesterday, Abel and Ola Osundaro told a local CBS station they would not help prosecutors by testifying against Smollett. The brothers were in a dispute with police over property that was seized from their home back in the early stages of the investigation. For this reason, they were refusing to continue cooperating. But just hours ago today, the brothers reversed course and in a statement from their attorney say they will now help authorities with the case. Smollett is charged with 6 counts of disorderly conduct for allegedly lying to police about being the victim of a racist and homophobic attack in February of 2019. The brothers were initially arrested, then released after telling police they were paid to stage that attack on the Empire actor. And a deceased billionaire's massive wealth is set to be distributed to his alleged victims. The Jeffrey Epstein Victims Compensation Program started accepting requests today. An attorney says victims who claim they were sexually abused by Epstein or his co-conspirators can come forward and make their claims. Fund administrators will conduct interviews and determine how the $630 million in the fund will be divided. Those with the most proof will receive the most money. Epstein was accused of sexually abusing underage girls and running a sex trafficking ring. He died in jail last year before his case was heard by a court. A medical examiner determined his hanging death was a suicide. And a former Baltimore mayor is on her way to federal prison to begin serving out her sentence. Catherine Pugh was given 3 years back in February. The 70-year-old resigned from her mayoral position after authorities started an investigation into a double selling of a book she wrote where she received hundreds of thousands of dollars. She pleaded guilty last November to federal conspiracy and tax evasion charges. She received an extension to report to prison due to the coronavirus. She will serve out her sentence in an Alabama prison. That's it for your Court TV News Break. Vinny?
Julia, have Abel and Ola from the Smollett case, have they gotten their own reality show yet? Maybe a hidden camera show or something?
Not that I know of, Vinny. We'll keep watching for it, though.
They should.
They are still characters in this
I'll
saga,
produce
for
it.
sure.
Yeah, unbelievable. Thank you so much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to take a look at the body cam video. This is Rashard Brooks, and he was the man who was shot and killed in the Wendy's parking lot by an officer, Officer Garrett Rolfe, who's now been charged with his murder. But before he was shot and killed, we have some body cam video of the interaction between the officer and Rashard Brooks. Take a listen.
Yep. This is University Avenue.
Yep.
I growed up here.
Okay.
You know, Natalie White, she's my girlfriend.
Okay.
She left off. I said, babe, I'm going to get Wendy's and I'm going to go back to work.
All right, at the time, I didn't think it was anything, noteworthy that his girlfriend, he was with his girlfriend, Natalie White. But now a woman named Natalie White has been arrested. Take a look at her mugshot. This is Natalie White, but not sure if it's the same Natalie White. But this Natalie White has been arrested and charged with burning down the Wendy's, right at the site where Rashard Brooks was shot and killed by police. While she was in court for a bond hearing, let's take a look.
Ms. White, this is your first appearance. You have the right to remain silent. Anything that you say can be used against you in court. You have the right to have an attorney represent you at this hearing, and it appears to the court that you have retained Mr. Drew Finley to represent you in this matter. Is that correct, ma'am? Thumbs up if yes, thank you. All right, I'm going to take a look at your warrant, consider you for bond. I'm looking at a warrant from June the 13th at 125 University Ave, Atlanta, that alleges an arson first degree, and that said accused knowingly damaged by means of fire the Wendy's restaurant located at 125 University Ave, which was insured against damage by fire explosive. All right, I'll find that the warrant establishes probable cause. All right, Mr. Finley.
Recommendation of the state, we would at this time be asking for a signature bond. Your Honor, I've known Ms. White since she's probably 9 years old. She's from the North Coast community. Although I don't long live there, I've been dedicated to that community for since. So I know her, I know her family, and under their present financial circumstances, her mom's working at a pizza restaurant, and I'm helping them out, but they just don't have the funds to make any bond whatsoever. So I ask again that it be a signature bond. The mom is with me. She reminds me of her sister, her godmother's with me. I just can't really bring it forward because of COVID-19, but they all are all situated in my office.
Well, if the option to me, hang on, Mr. Lewis. If what you're saying is it's signature bond or nothing, that doesn't give me much room to work, Mr. Finley. And I'm willing to consider something, and apparently the DA is too, recognizing that under OCGA 1761E, apparently she does not offend any part of the bond statute. So I would find that a setting of bond is appropriate. In other words, I'm not going to deny bond, okay?
Right. So then I ask that it be reduced as much as this court would be willing to reduce it, given that I'm holding in good faith that I've explored their finances and they are really limited.
Well, so
I'll tell you what, I just want to object to the $20,000. I don't think.
Well, look.
I object to the $20,000 bond.
Mr. Finley, I think we can find something that fits the situation, because what I'm concerned about is danger to the community, right? And so if there was a lower bond with a house arrest component and a stay off social media component, that may be, since the family is in such dire financial straits, that may be more appropriate in this case. What do you say?
I don't have a problem with the social media. I just don't, with no criminal record, 29 years old, no record at this point. I understand the social media part of it. I just don't see the house arrest part of it. I'm not quite sure, given the facts and circumstances. I just don't see this as a constant arrest case.
Mr. Lewis, before I reach a decision point, anything to add, sir?
We do believe that the House of Arrest or Anchor will check this case. Although this first offense is arson, the time building burned out, so we would like to stay away from that area. Would yield to the judgment of the state would add, of course, some type of observation.
Judge, I've been really hesitant to talk about that. But, we spent days here studying footage, and I'm just, this whole she burned the building down is just a false narrative. And so she did not burn the building down. She did not put that building on fire. I'm really avoided getting into that. That's just, the initial recommendation was $20,000, and there was no request from the state for an angle monitor and was going to request from the state for home confinement. And, you know, I don't know when they plan on convening grand juries and when we're going to get to court, but having someone on home confinement, no record for example.
So, Mr. Fenling, I've heard you say that repeatedly, sir. Repeatedly. You've indicated no record. But let's take a look at the other option here, which is no bond. Let's take a look at the danger to the community. And so if someone, and it is alleged to have set fire to a building with other people around, whether or not the building was occupied or unoccupied, that would present a danger to firefighters if they were able to get to the scene. That Wendy's is right next to a gas station. And so when you have fire right next to a gas station, that's a volatile combination. So I do not find the lack of a criminal record that persuasive. And a signature bond is denied. What I'm trying to do is fashion something that is fair, that complies with the statute, but mainly because really the only part of the statute, the way I see it, that Ms. White is likely to offend is the danger to the community. And so you see where I'm coming from, right?
Judge, I said everything I need to say. I know you. Anything I say, I pass the point of convention return. So you've heard what I have to say. It's pointless at this juncture.
All right. Yes, sir. And I appreciate your advocacy as always. All right, Ms. White, here's what we're going to do. We'll set a $10,000 good bond. Conditions will be that you can be released from the custody of the Fulton County Sheriff as soon as you have an ankle monitor.
All right, and she was able to post a $10,000. So Natalie White is out on bond. But the question is this the same Natalie White who Rashard Brooks referenced in that body cam video as being his girlfriend that he was just with that night? Let's bring back in our think tank. And Michael Sterling, let me start with you. If she is in fact Rashard Brooks's girlfriend, does that help or hurt her in her arson case for being accused of burning down that Wendy's?
I mean, I certainly think it hurts her because even though the prosecutors don't have to prove motive, I think it gives her motive. It certainly illustrates some sort of motive that she would go back to and return to that Wendy's where she dropped him off, and that she might have some sort of motive to do some damage to the property. So I think ultimately it harms her. And if I'm the defense attorney, if I'm the family's attorney, what I like to do, Vin, is I like to run to trouble, because whether or not you do it now or later, if she was in fact connected to Rashard Brooks, it's eventually going to come out. There's going to be text messages, there are going to be links. So I think everybody ought to figure out how to run to trouble and shape the narrative, because if she is in fact connected to him, they need to make that very clear and then figure out what's the best strategy going forward.
Michael Bixon, how does that play to a jury in light of everything that's happening right now?
I think it does work against the defense, and I agree with Michael in that, it does add towards a motive, and that's not a good thing for the defense. On the other hand, though, I think that if there is a connection between her and Mr. Brooks, I think that there is an opportunity to explore that for the defense. Maybe she was just out there peacefully protesting, not necessarily setting a place ablaze. So, I think that does present sort of at face value a large obstacle for the defense, but I think there are some things they can use to work with it.
Kimberly Bandeau, I think the jury's going to hear about it. Do you think the jury, first of all, how do you get a jury for a case like that when everything else is going around, right? So does the jury have to give their opinions on law enforcement and everything else for the arson case as well, because that could be perceived as part of the motivation here?
I definitely think you're going to ask a question about law enforcement, but moreover, with the destruction of property, I think you're going to ask that question because there are a lot of people who are non-criminals who may be destroying property now. So the attitude about property is probably not as strong, and you might want those jurors in your pool, the ones who've been, tearing down monuments.
Speaking, she gets an A+, because speaking of tearing down monuments, guess what we're talking about next, folks? When we come back, the 13th juror renders their verdict on what is happening around the country. I mean, monuments and statues being destroyed and defaced. I mean, should more be being done to hold the people who are doing that responsible? And I'm talking about hold them criminally responsible for defacing and destroying monuments and statues around the country. Your verdict when we come back.
Treason. They committed treason against the United States of America, and their statues are still here because their states put them here.
We shouldn't be memorializing, we shouldn't be commemorating, celebrating as icons people who are slavers, plantation owners.
You can't cancel out history and forget it.
That the statue needs to go.
Removing the statues is not removing history. We have books, we have museums, we have movies.
It's happening across the country. Monuments, statues are being defaced and destroyed and ripped down, and pretty much no one is being held accountable or responsible for it. When I say held responsible, accountable, I'm talking about law enforcement. I'm talking about, hey, someone goes and defaces public property, you know, someone tries to find out who did it and holds them responsible. So I posted this on social media today on Facebook asking you if law enforcement and the folks in charge should do more to hold the people who are doing this responsible criminally. And we begin with our comment of the day from Patty, our 13th juror. There is a law against defacing public property. If I picked a flower in the park, I would be ticketed or arrested. But these destructive people are tearing down and destroying thousands of dollars worth of artwork and are told it's okay. Go ahead, do what you want. Lawlessness has taken hold of the lawmakers, not the law enforcers. Kimberly Bandeau. Are these people getting a free pass from local politicians? These people who are destroying and defacing monuments and statues?
Yes, they are. I think because the monuments and statues are actually representing the Confederacy, and that means something different for people who don't relate to that heritage. And so I think that's an unpopular opinion right now. And so they're turning a blind, willful blind eye to it for political reasons, obviously.
Andy writes tonight, people who care too much about a statue either way. Why? It's a bronze dude you've never met. I don't get any of the hysteria on either side. Even if they took down the Statue of Liberty, I'd be like, well, I'll only notice when I'm in New York Harbor. Why do we pretend to love or hate these things we barely notice till they get torn down? Michael Bixon, is this much ado about nothing?
No, I mean, I think it is. You know, it's a symbol. And whether you love it or whether you hate it, it's government property. And while I don't necessarily like the statues or the monuments, you know, I think there's a proper process to have them removed. Go through the legislature, have them taken down. But when you have people just tearing them down, I think that's when you enter into a very dangerous territory. Because today it might be them, but what if tomorrow it's a statue of Martin Luther King and they're tearing it down because they don't like him and they're not going to prosecute him because of this? I think it's very dangerous territory.
Mickey writes, if it is really important to some people to keep them, then they need to make an effort to take them down before they get vandalized or are taken down for them because it's only a matter of time. All right, Michael Sterling, if we're going to take them down, who are we taking down? We're taking down Christopher Columbus, a man who represents Italian Americans' love for the New World and the new country, a big symbol for them. Teddy Roosevelt, the namesake of my junior high school, or George Washington, or Gandhi. Gandhi was defaced down in D.C. How do we decide if we're just going to take them down, who gets taken down and who doesn't get taken down?
Well, Benny, I think we shouldn't make false equivalencies between Martin Luther King and a Confederate soldier. I think we shouldn't make false equivalencies between Gandhi and Confederate soldiers. Let's be very clear. These Confederate statues were erected as terrorism in the South to remind people who look like me that I was lesser than, that I was not equivalent to the white man. They were erected as a part of the cult of the lost cause. And nobody has handled this situation better than Mayor Landrieu, who reminds us that there's a difference between the remembrance of history and the reverence of it. And we shouldn't be revering people who terrorize and enslave Black folks.
Well stated. Deanna, tonight, each case needs to be fully and earnestly investigated. The guilty parties should be prosecuted for the most severe charge possible and punished to the fullest extent of the law. People should not be given a pass because of the current cultural and political climate. The laws are written to keep and maintain order in a civilized society. There should be no free passes. Kimberly Bando, does this lead us down a dangerous path? If, as you said before, a blind eye is turned under these circumstances, that it could turn into something worse down the road?
Not necessarily. I mean, you have to be reminded, like in this context, like slavery was legal and it was actually unlawful for me to try to escape if I was a slave, my slave master's plantation. So just because it's a law doesn't make it a good law and doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be prosecuted. I do, however, agree that if you want the statutes down, I think that the appropriate way to do it is to go through either the court system or through your legislatures.
What a great job tonight. Kimberly Bando, Michael Sterling, Michael Bixon. Really appreciate it. Always love having you all on. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Benny.
Thank you.